WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. J.W. Simmons here, your host. The name of the show is We Should Know. We want to welcome you back. It's Tuesdays, each and every Tuesday. We come to you on Star Communications Channel 16, WCLN Radio. Our guest today is a person that is not only timeable, but very important to us as we progress into this kind of new world of post-pandemic. His name is Ernie Lee, the District Attorney for the 5th Prosecutorial District. Ernie, we've had many conversations, and I want to just open by thanking you for taking the time to come in and sit down, not only and talk to us, but talk to your constituency in all of these counties you serve, to include Duplin, Jones, Onslow, and Sampson County as District Attorney.
It is great to be back with you. I've done this show many times, JW. We've covered a lot of interesting topics, and it's just great to be back in Clinton today to be with you.
Well, old friend, and I was looking at a lot of things you've been through. I want to mention going in, you are a retired major from the military, served as a JAG officer there.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your service in the military and for what you've done there. You've dedicated a huge portion of your life to the judiciary as district attorney, or working in the district attorney's office way back in Dewey Hudson's era. What compelled you? What was your sense of drawing to that judicial thing, that sense of justice? What drew you to that?
You know, when I was in law school, it was very soon in law school, I decided I really wanted to be a prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be able to serve the people. And also I wanted to be out there and be an advocate for those who have been victimized. And I thought, what better way than being a prosecutor? I was very fortunate to be hired by William H. Andrews, who was district attorney, for many years. He was originally from Duplin County. At the time, he lived in Onslow County. He gave me a chance back in January 1987. I've always been grateful for that. He didn't know me, and yet took a chance on me. And from day one, I was a purpose in my heart. I really wanted to work hard for Mr. Andrews, then of course for Mr. Hudson, Dewey Hudson. I just wanted to do what was best for the citizens of this district. I have very much enjoyed being a prosecutor. It's a very difficult job. I was an assistant DA for 24 years. I worked 12 years for Bill Andrews and 12 years for Dewey Hudson as an assistant DA. I've been DA now for over 10 years. So I'm definitely a career prosecutor. It's really what I wanted to do, and that's what I have done. It's a tough job, though. I mean, it's not like it is on TV sometimes that you'll see. It's a lot of work. My days start early and end late. I know yesterday morning I was in the Onslow office at 6:45 because I've got a pressing murder case over there I'm preparing for trial in, and I didn't finish up last night until 7:30. So it's just some very long days, but I very much enjoy serving the citizens. And I tell you what, we can make a difference. I tell all my assistant DAs, all my new ones, is in this job, you can truly make a difference. And what I mean by that is, when someone come in and they've been victimized or their family member has been murdered, they don't get to choose who their prosecutor is. It doesn't work that way in North Carolina. So someone's going to be assigned their case, whether it be me or one of my assistant DAs. But we've got, since they don't choose us, we've got to still do our very best for them. And which means staying in contact with them, talking with them, meeting with them, and taking them through a process that's probably very foreign to them. And we can truly make a difference. That's the reason I do it. I'm so passionate about it, even though I've been doing it for a very long time. It seems like it was just yesterday I started. And then again, I'm still excited when I wake up in the mornings. Now I'm tired sometimes, but I'm still excited. I've got a murder trial starting in July in Onslow County. And even though it's going to be a tough case, it's a very challenging case, I'm still excited about being back in the courtroom and trying this case.
Well, that's one of the things that strikes me with all the years you and I have been talking and looking at where we are now. It seems that there's, particularly as it relates to officer-involved shootings,
yes, sir,
officer-involved use of force situations, there's different expectations now that has been kind of ladled out to the judiciary and particularly prosecutor's office. And one of those things is, how do you analyze that, not only from the factual sense, but in the social expectation sense? Do you feel caught between the two, what the public may expect, particularly with Facebook and social media, and what the facts of the case is? We've seen that unfold recently here in North Carolina in Pasquotank County.
That's right.
Clearly, some of the public opinion varies differently from what the true understanding of the law is. So is part of this an education thing for you?
Oh, absolutely. And JW, when you mention social media, we definitely live in a social media world. This world did not exist in 1987 when I became a prosecutor. I mean, Facebook and those type things, Snapchat and Facebook and all those things, I really don't even quite understand. They're all out there. And we live in a different world now. People expect answers immediately. People expect transparency immediately. Mm-hmm. And as you know, being in law enforcement, investigations take time. And we don't always know all the answers on day one. But this society expects things immediately. That's just the culture we live in. But in the same vein, social media can also be a very good thing because it does get a message out. And it allows more people to see that message. But dealing with officer-involved shootings, I have been involved in 7 myself as the elected district attorney. Those are all officer-involved shootings. 2 in Sampson County, 3 in Onslow County, 1 in Duplin, and 1 in Jones. And as a matter of fact, the first month I was the elected district attorney, I swore in January 2011. In February 2011, there was an officer-involved shooting over in Swansboro, North Carolina, which is part of my district. And so immediately I was having to deal with that issue. In terms of those type shootings, I always tell my prosecutors, now I'm the one who makes the final decision. I will have someone assigned to help me with them, but I make the decisions on these cases. That first of all is we've got to gather the information. We've got to gather the evidence. We've also got to determine what the admissible evidence is. And then we've got to meet with the victims' with the decedent's families, meet with law enforcement, and then at some point make a decision. Ultimately, on these type cases, it's going to be up to the district attorney to make the decision. Mm-hmm. The buck stops with me. Mm-hmm. I will consult with my fellow prosecutors, my assistant DAs, but the buck stops with me. I will make the decision. I will be the one who announces the decision. Now, one of those things too, even with social media, you've got to understand that no matter what decision you make, someone's not going to be happy. I've seen that through the years. Someone's going to be unhappy with your decision. But what you got to do is just do what you know is right based upon the facts of the case and the law. Public perception does not dictate what the facts are. The facts are the facts. My job is through working with law enforcement, particularly the SBI, State Bureau of Investigation, is to find out what those facts are.
Yes, the interesting thing is in following this train of thought, there seems to be a certain expectation that the public typically has that not only does not follow the facts, but oftentimes it doesn't follow the law, particularly the way officers are trained and what their jobs are, because they're an extended part of the judiciary in the sense of the enforcement role that they carry. And you guys, you know better probably than anybody that they have certain duties that they are obligated by law to carry out.
Oh, absolutely.
And they can't waver. I mean, if that person has to be placed into custody, one of the media folks or somebody with the media mentioned, well, why can't you just wait till later to do it? Well, there's certain cases you can't walk away from as an officer. And I, sometimes I look at some of the challenges they face.
Oh, absolutely. Officers, they have a search warrant, arrest warrant that's been authorized by a magistrate or a judge. They have a duty. They have a sworn duty to serve that warrant. I mean, that is the job they have. And far too often, the officers get blamed basically for doing their jobs. And it's a difficult job. It's not to say officers should not be held accountable, because all of us must be held accountable for our actions. We all must follow the rules and laws of the state. But nonetheless, they have a very difficult job. Every time an officer shows up at a residence or stops a car, they really don't know what may happen after that. Every time they walk up to a door that's shut and they knock on that door and announce law enforcement, they never know who's on the other side of that door or if that person's armed at the time. When they stop a car, and I think about this a lot in my district, because I got a very large district, a very rural district. We have officers, deputies out there patrolling at nighttime by themselves, and they will stop a car out midnight, dark. They will walk up to that car. There's not any other cars around. And every time they walk up, they're in essence taking their lives in their own hands because they don't know who's sitting in that car or whether that person is armed or not. And I think about that a lot. Officers recently, maybe a lot of them have been getting bad raps, but the vast majority of officers are law-abiding citizens like we're supposed to be. The vast majority of the officers get up every day with not being paid enough, working long hours, and going out and doing their jobs. And when I go speak to officers, I always remind them, I just want to thank you all because when you're all out there patrolling at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, that means my family and I can be at home sleeping safely because y'all are out there patrolling the streets. And I think about that all the time. I mean, obviously, as I said, officers that do the wrong things, that do not follow the law, they must be held accountable because no one is above the law in this country. But also, not all officers can be placed in that category because that is a very, very small minority.
One of the things you pointed out, and I want to touch on before we have to go to break very quickly, is ultimately the decision on prosecution, whether it's an officer-involved situation, whether you look at it and there's evidence to show that the officer needs to be prosecuted or it needs to be prosecuted in another direction. That is ultimately the district attorney's job in their judicial district. In all of the districts in North Carolina, some 42 districts. 43 districts in North Carolina. So folks, I think as far as the education process, need to understand that's part of your role as well. So we got about 20 seconds here before we're going to go to break. I'll let you respond to that very quickly.
And I'll follow up after the break too. But yes, my job is, as the district attorney, is not to delegate these responsibilities, these duties. My job is to step up and make those tough decisions. And we can talk about it after the break more.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be back in a moment. We're talking with District Attorney Ernie Lee, the 5th Prosecutorial District right here in North Carolina, about a lot of issues you've heard on the news and talked about. We'll be back in a moment. Call a friend.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air. J.W. Simmons here, your host. Our guest today is Ernie Lee, the District Attorney for the 5th Prosecutorial District. Ernie, you're also a member of the Conference of District Attorneys and serving as the Executive Committee for 2021, which I found very interesting in a lot of what that committee does and that Conference of District Attorneys do. A huge part of that is what we're doing today, and that's connecting with the population in North Carolina.
Absolutely. I'm also honored to say I'm now president-elect for the Conference of DAs. I'm on the executive committee, and I serve with Jim O'Neill, who's the elected district attorney from Forsyth County. He's the current president, and I'm scheduled to be the next president next June.
Well, that's going to be an interesting position in today's world because as we went to break, we were talking about, a bit about the continuing role and expanded role of district attorneys in our state. And for me and a lot of folks I talk to, that's not only a critical role as far as justice is concerned, but it's a role that carries a weight of education with it too. Oh. So what we're trying to do, I guess, here today is educate the public on what justice is today, criminal justice, versus that term we've heard a lot. It's called social justice. There are those that say, well, social justice kind of is a template over criminal justice, but criminal justice is still separate, but public opinion. Help us kind of weave through that and kind of follow up on what we were talking about before we went to break.
First of all, I want to say, look, we've got to have rule of law in this country. There are laws, and the courts interpret the laws. We as citizens are not to interpret those laws. It's supposed to be the courts that interpret those laws. But in saying that, there are a lot of people out there that really want to impose their own opinions about what the law ought to be rather than what the law actually is. And a lot of this misperception, I think, comes from television, because people hear things on television. I hear it all the time. You did not prove this case beyond all doubt. That is not the criminal standard in the state of North Carolina or in this country. It's beyond a reasonable doubt, a doubt based upon reason and common sense. But you'll hear people in the public say beyond all doubt or beyond a shadow of a doubt. That is not the legal standard. Or you'll hear about different things where people, well, I have the right to do this. I have the right to do that. And it's not written that you have this right. I mean, this is not part of our Constitution. I hear so many people talk about the Constitution, but I would encourage more people to actually read the Constitution. And secondly, the Constitution is a living, breathing, very flexible document. It was done by our founding fathers for that reason, because the courts are interpreting it now. Those words, what do they mean? And that's the reason you've also not only got to read the document itself, but also the appellate decisions, particularly the United States Supreme Court, how they've interpreted it. But with social media, yes, you do hear a lot about, first of all, social justice versus justice. Look, it's all supposed to be just justice. Justice is the basis for our system. It will never be perfect on this earth, but I tell you, I think in the United States, we've done the best we can, where in terms we have a constitution, we have laws, we have state constitution, we have state laws, and we set up the best system we can as humans. It's not perfect, but it's the best, I think, in the world. And it's not supposed to be necessarily social justice. It's supposed to be about justice. And what does justice mean? Well, it means many things to different people. It all depends where you're at in the system, I suppose. I've told this story many times where an individual that I knew when I was a young prosecutor, their car was broken into. They were very angry at the person who broke in their car. And this person was a teenager, eventually caught. The person landed up getting probation. The people whose car was broken into were not happy with that. They thought he deserved a whole lot more. But I told him, look, he's first-time offender, young age, probably probation. That's what happened. A year later, one of their children got charged with some drugs. They came and saw me because I'm the only prosecutor they knew. And what do you think they wanted for their son? They weren't necessarily looking for justice, they were looking for mercy. And so it all depends where you are in this spectrum. It's always easy to say when something happens out there, well, they ought to execute that person. But those very same person, they serve on a jury, they actually got to face a real living human being and decide what to do. Is not that easy. And so justice comes in many forms. My job, though, is ultimately to seek justice. As a matter of fact, in the bar rules, it says that prosecutors are deemed to be ministers of justice. And my job is to seek justice. Now, it comes in many forms. Sometimes the justice means the death penalty, which I'm in favor of the death penalty. Sometimes it means life without parole. Sometimes it means something less than life without parole, a certain number of years. Sometimes it means probation. Sometimes it means a deferred prosecution. Sometimes it means what we call a 90-96 in a drug case, where you won't land up with a record eventually, as long as you do community service or whatever. Sometimes it means a dismissal. Because if a state cannot prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, I, as a minister of justice, as a district attorney, have a duty to dismiss that case. So it comes in many forms, but a lot of it is, where are you in the spectrum? If you're the victim, it may mean one thing. If you're the one who's accused, it may mean something else. So,
well, one of the things that strikes me is that oftentimes we see groups of people that maybe have identified themselves as victims because they represent a certain group of people. And when that happens, it's automatic that they're going to deflect anything that has a sense of justice to it or control, because therefore I am a victim. And so that's something you have to face as well.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I've got to be objective, not subjective, objective. I've got to look at these things, step back, and not be influenced by public opinion, not be influenced by what may be in the media, not be influenced by any particular individuals. My job is to gather this information, such as in officer-involved shootings, which are very difficult cases to look at, but to gather all this information, look at it objectively, because I do not represent any of these groups. I represent the state of North Carolina. And my job is to look at it as an objective observer with no agenda and decide what is right based upon the facts and the law applied to those facts. And I take that job very seriously. Whenever I get an officer-involved shooting or any other open investigation like that, I don't have any preconceived notions as to what happened because I don't know. Even if I hear something out there, I don't know if that's really true. And as a prosecutor, I deal with evidence, not speculation, not opinions, not what people think may have happened, what did happen. And I know that in many of these cases, there will be like snippets of like a video released. And then people base their opinion upon those few seconds. And look, those may be accurate. That may be what happened. But look, I want to see the beginning of that video to the very end. Then I also want to speak to those witnesses. I want to look at all the photographs. I want to look at the reports, the witness statements, all those things before I make a decision. Because again, I deal with admissible evidence. And I deal with what is the evidence in this case. And it takes time to do that. And again, people want you to rush through these decisions. But look, I want to be accurate. And I want to be able to answer all the questions I can from that decedent's family, from law enforcement, from the public, and from the media.
You are aware of committees that have been put together by the governor to look at issues related to race and crime and arrest situations, and the criminal justice reform is the big title now nationally and locally. In a conversation with some law enforcement folks a while back, the conversation kind of went around this idea of body cameras, and a very interesting point occurred in that those cameras are important to show content, but oftentimes a camera will not context it correctly for you. And I think you kind of alluded to that in what you just said as it relates to looking at the context of the total event rather than just a piece of the event.
What we call it in my office, we look at the totality of the circumstances. And that means we want not just that snippet in time, which may be a body camera or it may be a photograph. We want all to happen outside of that photograph, outside of that body camera, because this body camera is getting one perspective. And it's usually going to be, of course, the officer's perspective at that moment in time, but what is happening off camera. That is also very, very important to me. I want to know the entire situation as best we can decide or determine. And which again, you got to look at statements of witnesses. You've got to look at photographs of not just one scene, but many scenes. You've got to also, is there any physical evidence? You've got to look at shell casings. You've got to look at the number of shots fired. You got to look at the weapons. Were the weapons operating properly, functioning properly? You've got to look at go back and find out, how did all this even happen to begin with? I mean, what is the background? How do we get to this situation? Because things just don't happen. There's a reason they happened. And then the actions after it happened. For all parties, what happened after. And all this is not always captured on a body cam. And I tell you, I've looked at a lot of body cams. There's a lot of movement on them. And sometimes, you're doing still frames, but it's sometimes hard to even get an idea of the whole story because there's so much movement. I've done, like I said, I've done 7 officer-involved shootings plus many other investigations as a district attorney. And I can tell you, they will take it out of you. There's a lot of work involved. There is a lot of effort involved. There's a lot of man hours involved. And I'll take that time. And even once I've made my decision, I will usually wait a couple of days before I announce it. And the reason I do that is because, first of all, I want to make sure it's accurate as best I can make it. Secondly, I want to step back away from this case, this investigation, because you get so involved in it. I got to step back and just work on something else and then go back to it.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to ponder the question that deals with the expectation that the public should have when they encounter a law enforcement officer. What should they expect and what should they do when that happens? I want to deal with that a little bit from your perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking with District Attorney Ernie Lee. Stay tuned. Call a friend.
At home or away, knowing who is at your door is priceless. Star Communications is here to help with its doorbell security camera by Skybell. Live viewing and two-way audio equips you with the ability to always see and greet anyone that shows up at your door. If this is the kind of confidence you are looking for, call Star Communications today at 1-800-706-6538 to learn more about this intelligent security that you can always depend on.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on air. We're talking to District Attorney Ernie Lee. Ernie, when we went to break, and on break I mentioned something, I want to kind of come back with a discussion from you with some of the cases you have investigated as District Attorney that deal with officer shootings. And these are life and death situations. But there's an expectation, I think, that the general public needs to understand if they are encountered by an officer, whether it's a traffic stop, whether it's a situation that involves on the street or what have you, there's certain things that law enforcement officers have raised their hand and taken an oath to do that follows the law, that are protocols that people need to understand. They don't need to do certain things, and simple things like if you're stopped, don't automatically take off running and put your hand in your pocket, or if you're at a traffic stop, don't get out of the car and come running back toward the patrol car. Let's talk about just some of the fundamental things that maybe most folks think, well, that's just normal, but in today's world, that's not normal anymore.
Yeah, I've noticed that too in a lot of these cases that individuals, when you get stopped by a law enforcement officer, first of all, is you've been stopped by a law enforcement officer. You just need to sit there and follow instructions. They've got to recognize these officers do not know if you're a threat or not because they don't know you. And these officers obviously have to be on guard. Many times these officers don't even know how many people are actually in the car when they walk up. They're not even sure. So they walk up. If you're told to follow instructions, then follow the instructions, which means keep your hands up where the officers can see them. Do not make sudden jerky motions or movements in front of the officer. Certainly do not be reaching down into a glove compartment because the officer doesn't know if you're trying to get your registration out at that time or a gun. Obviously, if the officers ask for your registration, you tell the officer, I'm about to get my registration. If you are one of those who has a concealed permit and you have a gun in the vehicle, let the officer know, officer, I do in fact have a firearm in this vehicle. I am authorized under the law to have this. This gun is located here. And you let the officer know. That way the officer can be aware of that situation. But again, just follow the instructions. Definitely do not jump out of your vehicle and quickly start approaching the officer. The officer, once they stop you, one of the things they're actually doing is they're actually running the tag at that time. They're trying to find out who this person is and to find out if the vehicle is stolen. Because obviously that changes the whole situation right there. But again, they're doing things administratively in their patrol car. You wait for the officer. The officer then will get out. Officers are trained to be professionals. Now, we've seen videos out there where some officers, again, that's a very, very small minority, that have not been professional. And of course, they're dealt with. But the vast majority of officers in this nation are servants of the people. They're working for the public. They're working for the citizens. They want to protect the public. And these officers walk up, just follow their instructions. And there's nothing wrong for people. I think it's going out of style with a lot of people. There's nothing wrong with saying yes, sir, no, sir, to an officer, or yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, to an officer. I was brought up that way, to say yes, sir, and no, sir, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. You know, I don't see it a lot as much as I used to, but I think people, one thing that shows respect, you may not even know that officer, but it's not for the officer, it's for the office they represent, which is law enforcement, whether it be a police department, a sheriff's office, or some other agency. They represent that agency. And just follow instructions. Do what you're told. Be polite. Again, I don't see a lot of that many times. I think that in this country, we've become a very individual type nation. It's all about individual rights versus the collective good sometimes. I mean, we do have a Bill of Rights in this nation, and we do all have individual rights. But also, we got to remember, it should also set self aside, make it for the good of the country, make it the good for your community. And I don't sometimes see that. Again, be respectful to the officers. They have earned it. The amount of training and time they have to put in to be a police officer or a deputy is tremendous. Secondly, they're not the highest paid people in our community by far, and yet they do it. Why do they do it? Because they love the job. They love serving people. They love protecting people. And I tell you, I get so many times though where I'll have an individual come to me. This is actually very refreshing. They got a speeding ticket from a trooper, a deputy, or an officer. They will come in and tell me, Mr. Lee, I'm guilty. I did it, but that officer was so polite. That officer treated me so well and was professional. They had nothing against the officer. That's also very refreshing. And often I'll look on the notes on these citations and see what comments the officers put down about whether or not the person was polite, professional, cooperative. Because I want to know those type things. But again, follow the instructions. Because look, we all have to live under rules in this country. It's not a nation of one, it's the nation of many. And we've got to live under these rules. How can we expect our children to follow rules if we ourselves won't follow the rules?
Are there occasions that officers have the right and will ask people to step out of their vehicles and kind of give us an example of when that may occur, and is it expected that we can comply with that?
Absolutely. You know, there could be a time where an officer believes it's necessary for his own safety or the safety of others to do a pat-down search. And you may be asked to step out. It may be that the probable cause exists for whatever reasons to search that vehicle. There may be probable cause to do that. Maybe a search incident to an arrest. There are many reasons an officer may have the authority under our Constitution to have an individual step out. Again, if a person, though, is not comfortable for whatever reasons, again, it's still be respectful, be professional to the officers. But again, if you have some concerns, is nothing prevents you from saying, officer, I understand what you're requesting. In any way, maybe another officer can come, a supervisor. Is there any way? Because I'm just a little concerned about some things right now. But again, be respectful. Be respectful. And again, I see a lot of that people aren't respectful. I deal with my job all the time. Where people just come in, they're angry, they're not very polite, and they're not polite. And I say, well, you know, it goes a long way if you're just polite, kind, and professional people. That carries a lot of weight right there.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I'm hearing is, again, I'm reflecting back on what a lot of social media is putting out now and those kinds of things, that there's a process involved here, that folks would look at that and say, well, I can follow this process and then I can have my day in court.
That's right.
And then we can discuss it there. But to try to have court beside the road or in a public setting when you're encountering a law enforcement officer is probably not the best thing to do.
That is not the time to try your case. We do have a mechanism. We have the court system, which is set upon being fair and just and equal justice under the law. What you do, if you're not satisfied with what the officer has done, or if you're not satisfied with the citation you may have received, whatever it might be, look, you can have your day in court. That officer then will be subject to cross-examination. That officer will then also, his credibility is going to be measured by the court. And so wait for your day in court. Everybody has the right to go to court, all the way from an infraction on up to murder. You have the right to have your day in court, which makes our system so great. But wait and do it in court. It's not the time to be arguing with the officer at the scene. The officer's made his or her decision based upon the facts that they perceive them to be and the law. But if you feel like you've been treated unjustly, wait to court and present your case. And then a neutral, objective judge will hear those facts.
One of the things that you do, and of course, you know, we've known each other for a long time, you often go out and engage the public and speak to groups and church groups and others and make yourself available within the community to help explain some of these things. Do you see an increased request for your presence to help us understand in various communities that you serve?
I will notice there will generally be an increase when there's been some situation like it happened in Pasco-Tank County or somewhere else in this country, and then more people will be asking me to come and speak. I've noticed that through the years. Sometimes it takes a crisis or a very serious situation, but I am very open to go and speak to groups. It's amazing the number of people out there that really don't even, they have misconceptions about what the law really is on certain things. Mm-hmm. They have misconceptions, again, because those misconceptions are based upon television or based upon social media or based upon Facebook or opinions of someone without actually reading the law themselves. But, I've also found that the people are very open to learning. They are very open to learning. I'll go speak to groups, whether it be at churches, different groups out there, Ruhr Town or Civitan or different groups, and there's amazing the number of questions I get. I'll get questions about searches, what we just talked about. Mm-hmm. I will get questions about arrest. I will get questions about officer-involved shootings. I'll get questions about murder cases and the death penalty. I'll get a lot of questions about the death penalty in this state. And because people, I think, do have a thirst for knowledge. And so I try to be out there educating the public. Because again, my job is to see that justice is done. Well, one of the ways I can ensure that justice is done is making sure people understand what justice even is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that part of what justice is codified in the law itself, mm-hmm. that is actually put in place not only by the Constitution of the state and federal government, but also in the elected officials that we send to make the laws. It's an interesting system, I think, and I want to kind of maybe in our last segment allow you to touch on that so folks can understand there is a way to deal with this. And sometimes I know officers get very concerned because they look at folks and go, I'm enforcing the law that I did not make, that I did not create, and took an oath to enforce that law.
Absolutely.
So when we come back, we got about 15 seconds here. If you want to touch that, and then we'll come back from break and kind of follow up.
JW, I think that's an outstanding point. These officers did not draft or enact the laws. They're simply enforcing the laws. And there are mechanisms which we can talk about. There are mechanisms how to change those laws.
We're going to come back from our break and we'll kind of get into that. And again, there's so much depth as we go to break. I'm going to remind folks that if you will call people, have them tune into this show. But we'll take a break now. And when we come back, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be our last segment. So we're going to try to cover some things, maybe go pretty fast to make sure we touch base on everything we want to get to. So stay tuned, call a friend. We'll be back in a moment.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us today. I also want to take a moment to just stop and kind of congratulate the folks that make this show actually work each and every week. Jason Miller and Mitchell Brewington won the Telly Awards. And this is a big deal, folks. This is something that started back in 1979, and the Telly Awards covers the entire country, all 50 states, 5 continents. We're talking 12,000 plus contributions. Not only did they win an award, they won gold, silver, and bronze. So we want to give them 2 thumbs up for quality work in advertising, quality work in what they produce. We're proud of these guys at Star Communication, and we're going to give them really a big kudos. And yes, this is a big deal. So thank you for what they do, and we thank you for watching what they do. Each and every week I'm here to talk to you, but it's their efforts that make that possible. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to kind of follow through with that. Thank you for looking at We Should Know each and every week. And I want to also thank you for sending us your comments to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. That's weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And also, again, I get a lot of folks who still like to drop a card to Post Office Box 1482. I'll get a letter or a note about a show we've done. Just send that to Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina. Notice I said Clinton, North Carolina. Even if you pronounce it Clinton, North Carolina, it'll still come to that box. Just send it to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. It's the email. And if it's Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina, 28328. So thank you for all of that. And as we're talking today about a critical part of your life that literally shapes your life each and every day, and the guy that kind of leads that champion cause of justice here in the 5th prosecutorial district is District Attorney Ernie Lee. Ernie, have to do that little monologue, and I look forward to doing that every week to let folks know how they can reach us. Your office has open doors on it. Mm-hmm. You constantly, and you've been a guest and a friend for a long time, you're constantly encouraging people to reach out and talk to you, to communicate with you. I think that's the champion of this cause of justice as we look at what justice is and get people to understand, and we talked a bit about this off camera, how important it is to understand what a great country we have and what justice means here. We champion that cause in the United States better than and far beyond anyone on this planet. And you've been in this business a long time. Mm-hmm. How do we educate and continue to educate the general population more on this subject? The folks that are everyday working, they don't have time to look at everything you look at, but they got to have confidence in you and our system.
I'll tell you what, I would encourage, first of all, everyone to watch your show and listen to your show, because you cover a large number of topics out there, so many, many subjects. And then people can learn. Today's show, I hope people can learn from this about the law. But so many other aspects that you've covered through the years that people can truly learn. You just got to take the effort, make the effort to try to learn. And you're giving it to them right now. So I'd encourage people to do that. Secondly, we got the internet. People can look up almost anything, and you can read. If you have a question about a particular law, you can look it up and read it. But again, I also have an open phone, open door policy at my office. I get a lot of mail from people with different questions, and I will respond back. Now, I cannot respond back to an anonymous letter, and I get those. And someone will be, concerned about something or have some issue, but I cannot respond back to anonymous letters. But I will, anybody who writes me or calls me, if I don't know the answer, I will try to find out the answer for them. And I get a lot of letters in my 4 counties in this district. One thing we're talking about too, if you're not satisfied with something in our system, the great thing about our system is that you can always petition our legislative body, who are elected by the people, to make changes in laws. Mm-hmm. I mean, our representatives in Raleigh or our representatives in Washington, they represent us as the citizens. If we are not happy about a particular law, nothing prevents us from writing that senator, that representative, whether it be state level or federal level, and letting them know we have issues. If enough people do that, there will be changes in that law, undoubtedly. And I go to the legislature a lot. I have to go to the legislature a lot as part of my duties with the Conference of DAs and being elected district attorney, because I'm advocating for certain laws out there dealing with criminal law. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, one thing I've been impressed by the legislature is, even though they're extremely busy, they will take the time to meet with me and other elected district attorneys and other officials about particular laws. They will take the time, and they will meet with citizens as well, because you're their constituents. They will listen. And again, I would just encourage people to use our system, our democratic system that we have in this country. We have a republic in this as a nation. We are a republic. We vote people in, and those people are to represent us, and they will listen. Take advantage of those things and just educate yourself. There is no reason that we shouldn't be educated on any subject we want to be with the internet. And there are a wealth of books out there on every subject you can think about. There's things online you can read. But also, I would encourage people, though, is check your sources and look at many sources. Mm-hmm. Just don't go with the first thing you see, because some websites may have certain agendas. Is get a good overview of things and then try to reach an opinion. And at that point, if you have issues, contact your legislator.
You mentioned something I think is critically important too in today's world of electronics, of Facebook, Twitter, and all these other things that sometimes you get caught up in. Fact checking is so critically important. And to me, the district attorney's office is an avenue where you can validate information. If there's something there and you're not really sure about, or if it's something, I mean, let's face it, there's things could be posted under your name on Facebook and the spin taken off from that. And, you know, we've seen cases of things of that nature happening. So it's important for me, and I think you are the same way, we're kind of in that same bracket of thought, that check with us before you start spinning that. Let's look at it and say, what, did I even say that? Does it even fit the context of what we're talking about? Does that content even work here? Because those are two different things. That content and context changes the whole view of a matter.
It certainly does. And, you know, if I said something, I own it. It is what it is. But you need to check your sources and just be very careful that the sources you have are actually legitimate sources. And what I mean by that is just check the background on these sources. I tell you, almost in every homicide case I've ever done, officer-involved shooting I've had investigated, there's always usually like people out there talking about certain things of what they think happened. I'll hear those things sometimes. I will hear them. It's amazing when I get the law enforcement reports and get all the evidence. It was not like that. It is not. There's a narrative out there in the public that may not be actually true. Because what happens is individuals will say something, we don't know where their sources are, and then it'll be repeated and repeated. And of course, with the internet, with social media, it can be repeated millions of times very quickly and go worldwide very quickly. And I've noticed that. Now, it's not my job though to comment on facts of cases publicly. It is not my job to do that because I've got to ensure every defendant has a right to a fair trial. But I will hear it many times, whether I'll get stopped by someone, well, I heard this, and I know it's not so. I'll know it's not so. And I say, well, look, I think you need to wait and hear the case. You'll probably hear a little bit different.
One of the things I want to try to get in, and we're kind of coming to a close, but I want to try to get your observation on this. What's the role, in your opinion, of media when it comes to factual information rather than just putting something up to create sensationalism or spin?
I wish the media would actually check their sources too. And certainly not only just talk to one source, talk to several sources. I would just request media also not to simply jump on the first thing you think may have happened. Because generally, many times, the facts turn out to be much different than initially reported. I've seen that many times in cases. I've seen it in some of my cases where something was reported on day one, it kept being repeated throughout the case. That was never the evidence. Never the evidence. It never came out in trial like that. Never. Because it was never it wasn't accurate. I see that a lot. I say just check your sources because, you know, the media, we have a free press in this nation, which again makes us one of the greatest nation in the world because we have a free press. We have freedom of speech. But in saying that, let's try to make sure we're as accurate and as transparent as we can be in presenting the facts because people are relying upon the media to give them the news. And it should be the news. What are the facts? And if in fact a media organization makes a mistake, and we're all going to make mistakes, it's just you own that mistake. Just say you made a mistake, but we're going to learn from that mistake and try to do better in the future. I think that also carries a lot of weight with the public. Again, I just like everyone, I look at the news, I look at media sources, but I tell you, I am also very quick to check numerous media sources about a particular issue before I rely upon just one.
And part of that, I think, is the idea of sensationalism. And as you've pointed out, and as well as judges that's sat in that seat and pointed out, the justice part takes time. Quite frankly, 6 months, year, 2 years, it's not an immediacy thing. So I want to thank you for that as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's you know, cases. I wish that everything could be investigated very quickly and put on my desk in a nice little package quickly, but it's not that way. Witnesses must be interviewed, and trying to find a lot of witnesses sometimes takes a lot of time. Law enforcement, we've got to send stuff up to the lab. The lab does not work like it does on TV, where you turn it in that day and that afternoon you got a result. It takes a lot of time. So yeah, we will give the answers as quickly as we can, but more important, I want them accurate.
District Attorney Ernie Lee, I want to thank you for being with us today. The time always goes fast when you're here. You have an open mic anytime you want to come back. And again, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you do for this district. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. We look forward to seeing you again next week right here. And as always, we look at you and say, may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.